So, hi Ashwin.
Hi, Mana.
Good morning.
Nice to see you. Good morning.
Thank you so much for joining for this episode of Gathering Genie. I just started Gathering Genie as a way to have conversations with people who are having different types of gatherings than the usual. And I came to meet Ashwin last year, and they're doing very interesting stuff in the tech for development space. And that's why Ashwin is here to talk about one of the gatherings that they did differently recently. So, Ashwin, maybe in a few words, you want to just share with us a bit about the context in which you organize gatherings.
Sure. So, I'm for the last year and a bit, I've been working for an organization called Project Tech4Dev, and the primary aim is to help the tech community in the social sector, starting in India, but maybe also expanding to other countries. And aside from direct technical help through the building of open source products to help the sector, as well as direct consultation with organizations, one of the primary aims is to build an ecosystem and support the strengthening of the ecosystem in the uh, social sector technical space. And that ecosystem consists of NGOs, technical partners serving that sector, as well as associated functions like those providing legal assistance or expertise in areas like data privacy and so on and so forth. Also connecting up with funders as well. And the philosophy behind this, and the founder of Tech4Dev, Donald Lobo, is very clear about this, is that it shouldn't be one hero organization trying to do everything. A strong community that is sustainable and where people can draw on each other's expertise is much more valuable in the long term than one organization doing everything or being at the center of everything. Um, and it's in that spirit that this has been operating even before Project Tech4Dev was even a named entity. So a core set of the original partners, NGOs, have been around now working together in varying capacities over a number of years. But now we're looking to really push into making that ecosystem larger and more effectively taking advantage of all the expertise and capacity that's available in the space in an efficient way, so that if typically NGOs are not competing with one another, if one NGO has solved something or has gained some expertise, um, if there's an efficient way to share that with someone else, they'd be willing to do so. But facilitating that is a large part of what Tech4Dev is all about. Long-winded answer, but I hope that gives the context.
Yes, yes, thank you so much. Um, so, we'll just go through a series of questions now. Um,
Sure.
and the first question is, in this context that you're working in, what do you think about the way gatherings happen or have been happening? So, in the space where people meet for around these issues.
So this is actually a very interesting question with a number of dimensions to it. The two dimensions I think about are uh, traditionally in terms of conferences versus more open-ended gatherings. That's one. But a second part of it is um, post-pandemic with a lot more remote work, then gatherings take on a different dimension, even within an organization. Previously, you may have been seeing people at the office every day, co-located, and then you have an offsite for a specific reason or an agenda. Now, often it's the on-site or the off-site is the place where people actually meet. And I think it throws up some interesting challenges because often want to cram a lot of agenda in there, but that's the only time people meet. So finding that balance between allowing people to make connections while getting through some of your work agenda is a challenge. Coming back to my original point, I think the conference structure has been around for a very long time, and there's a certain amount of prestige associated with that, with getting a whole set of panel speakers, a structured agenda, and so on and so forth. From my experience and from many others, is that the value in a conference comes more from what happens outside of the talks, especially now in an internet age. Maybe 20, 30 years ago, it was very different, but you can, at any conference, you can invariably watch 10 YouTube talks of all the speakers. So what are you going to the conference for? It's for all the other interactions. And now, knowing that, can we make that more explicit in the purpose of and structure of the event?
Yes. So tell us about the gathering that you were about to host, where you wanted to put some more thought and structure, especially around, I love the way you said it, it's the balancing the connection, but also getting the work done. So how did that play out
Yeah.
in the
So,
gathering? Yeah.
so this event started as a fairly loose thought bubble by our founder, thinking starting with a few hypotheses. One, that the technical leaders, whether they be CTOs, etc., in the nonprofit social sector, at least in India, are often a bit isolated. There may be only one or two technical folk in an NGO, and then typically day in, day out, they're dealing with all the other challenges that an NGO deals with. Everything related to tech, whether that just be something's wrong with my laptop, to, okay, how do we build this big technical platform for this funding proposal, all sort of come on their plate. And there was a sense that, hey, maybe there is a bit of isolation. People just constantly feel inundated. And unlike, say, in a tech company in the commercial sector, they don't really have peers and others of the same profession that they can share their experiences with, learn from, and spar on ideas on, etc. So, and of course, there is always the danger of each organization doing its own thing, because everyone just is very caught up in their work. The social sector organizations are probably even more capacity constrained than organizations in the commercial area. So the thought was, can we bring a bunch of these folk together, center the event around a few common topics that are often, from our experience, are being faced by many different NGOs, whether that be around data and data governance, or what do we make of all these advances in AI, or how do we build an internal tech team, or do we even do that? How is it even possible to do? Because salaries out there are like 5 times as high. Working with government, okay, ultimately, when technical systems need to be institutionalized, that means they need to get into government hands, or at least have some government participation. But that introduces a whole different set of challenges. And the thought was, can we bring people together and not only the people from NGOs, but maybe some of the technical partners who work in this space, and create some organic connections. The community building was very much the forefront of the agenda, and everything else, like the specific topics around knowledge sharing and so on, were intended to aid that, rather than it being primarily about getting through a certain set of topical agenda, and with community building and connections as a side benefit. It was very much the other way around.
Lovely. So, just tell us a bit more about how you went about designing when you thought about the day, and how did those community building elements come alive in the way you structured the day?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. In a and it was an interesting balancing act between the expectations of people and what they might ultimately take away from the event. Very often, and we actually had people give us this feedback as well. There were people who flew from other cities for this event for a day, and if they have to go back and report what exactly did you do, it's much easier for them to justify when you're saying, okay, there was an AI talk, then there was a session on this, then there was a session on that, and I attended 4 sessions. These are notes from those sessions. That's the more conventional way of doing things, what people are thinking about, and often it's like people will feel, okay, we did this, but you attended so many sessions, paisa vasool. I can justify that. It's much harder to say, oh, you know what, there was just a short 15-minute lightning talk, and the rest of the day was largely free-form discussion. We did get that feedback. A lot of people loved it, but we did get that feedback from some participants that they expected more of an agenda. So, and given that it was one day and there was limited time, there was some need to institute structure. And there was perhaps a fear of, if we make it completely unconference style, could it end up as chaos that we can't pull back in time? So the middle ground we settled on was a couple of very short plenary sessions and facilitated roundtables, which were very interactive, but we did set the topics in advance on the taking inputs from all the participants about which topics they would like to cover. And the facilitators were, briefed beforehand and so on. And then in the afternoon, post this, we left a lot of time open. There were some booths and all, but we left a lot of time open for conversations to continue on. From those roundtable sessions, or when they've engaged in a booth, people might have just met, and we want to leave a lot of time for that. And then the one other element we brought in, which was not so much in the unstructured style, but it was a panel session with some funders from 3 different organizations. And this was more just a bet or a hypothesis, again, by founder Don Lobo, that one of the key things that a lot of people in this sector aren't aware about is what goes into the funding equation. And it's often treated as this magical set of people sitting far who just make arbitrary decisions. We felt it was very valuable to hear the perspectives, understand the humans who are making this decision, how they're considering it, and so on and so forth. So that was a bit different from the rest of the event. And we just closed out in a fairly organic fashion. So yeah, it was, what do they say? The oxymoron that, spontaneity requires a lot of preparation. It was going to a lot of detail to try and make sure that the spontaneous conversations could emerge.
That's right. Yeah. And what did you notice about the participants? You did mention some were, who were looking for more input-driven sort of conversations. But otherwise, in the day, what did you notice about people's body language and the way they were contributing and the way they were asking, listening? Any observations there that stood out for you?
I think the level of participation and engagement exceeded our expectations. Like every one of the roundtable discussions was widely attended. People continued to, very few people were just sort of went off into the corner and were on their phones and so on. Sometimes it must have been an urgent meeting, but in general, people continued engaging at the roundtables, during lunch, afterwards. I think there was a very engaged body language. Perhaps the one thing, I mean, if I want to get into some specifics, one time where it didn't go exactly to plan was we had this funding panel. People were very engaged listening to that, but it is somewhat passive because you are listening. And then straight after that, we went into our closeout where we wanted to get people active and thing. At that point, a lot of people just sort of dispersed along with the funders into to get tea and coffee and so on. I think that was agenda-wise, we should have done something short and participative after the funders to just change the pace again, and then go into the close-up. People just sort of subtly took a cue. Okay, that's the last official session, and they're in a passive mode, and then they started dispersing. That was the one time when we felt people were not fully engaged in the session, and you have to call people and go, look, just 10 more minutes.
Yeah.
But the rest of the time, people were
Yeah.
really very engaged.
Yeah, it's interesting because we've also faced that sometimes when you keep these critical sections, and the funder conversations are very important. These participants see them very critical, so they're very glued in, and even if it's a
Yeah.
one way, they want to soak it in because, as you said, they don't get that human perspective behind the funder. And we also struggle this sometimes, that how do you then also do the bridge to closing, which is as high as
Yeah.
as high importance to them, and make the closing also. Yeah, so that's a ongoing challenge. And one other question I have is, how did you, like, when people were coming into the room and into the space, what did you notice about the energy then and when they were leaving? So any observations there?
It's a good thing. I was possibly slightly preoccupied with just getting things set up at the beginning to really pay attention. I
Yeah.
did definitely pay a lot more attention at the point people were leaving. Um, I saw a pretty high level of engagement and energy even as people are leaving. So we finished the event, like the official part of it, a scheduled part of it by four. It was due to finish by 4:30, but we finished about 10 minutes early, 4:20. And we had explicitly put on the agenda the next 1.5 hours was for people to stay around and network. There were some studies and so on.
Lovely.
A very good proportion of people stayed around at least 1 hour afterwards. And
Amazing.
we actually, even at 6 o'clock, we had to sort of push some people and say, okay, we have to
Yeah.
vacate the venue and so on. So yes, some people did, leave at the time because they had to travel or whatever else. But that was a sense that people felt that there was value there and they wanted to continue the conversations, either ask people specific questions or just hang around and chat and listen in on conversations, go back and visit the demo booth. So that was a pretty good validation that people found value, and they saw that actually it was very interesting. We conducted a poll right at the beginning using a Menti
Yeah.
about what are you mainly looking for, what are you most looking forward to out of this event? And I think the options were networking, hearing from experts, understanding knowledge about a specific topic, or sharing our own experiences. And it was very much the networking dominated. So people came in with the intention of connecting with others more than just listening. So I think that was reflected in what happened at the end as well.
Lovely. And can you tell us a little more about the facilitated roundtables? Because it's interesting that the topics you said you got from before, from also you felt that those were topics people were interested in, and they
Yeah.
were so a bit more about that would be nice to hear.
Sure. So uh, with we ended up with 10. We ended up with 8 roundtables, and we picked 2 facilitators for each, and with a conscious decision that to facilitate this should be from different organizations.
Okay.
There was one exception to this, which was a Tech4Dev roundtable, which was about our experiences through the fractional CXO program. People just wanted to hear what you've seen across different organizations, but all the other tables had people from 2 different organizations. And that was one, just to ensure it didn't skew too much towards one organization's experiences. But also second, if you explicitly pick 2 people from different orgs, then they are forced to talk to each other beforehand and think, rather than just thinking, okay, I know this topic, I'll just come on the day and wing it. And the broad guidelines that were given were, this is a topic of interest. Expect anywhere between 6 to 12 participants on the table, 35 to 40 minutes per conversation. There'll be 2 rounds of this. And you can run it however you want, with the broad guidelines that there should be opportunity for everyone to participate. And people should walk away with a combination of some insights that they didn't have before, as well as some knowledge of and connections that they can go away with and pursue further things. So you can do it however you want. You can have a short demo and introduce what you are doing and then go there, or you can start with an open set of questions, or you can first just hear what people want to do and then tailor the topic. So all of these things were there. One group on data governance actually created like 4 case studies and took people through that. Another group, the AI group, on the other hand, there was just lots of questions. They just handling questions and then taking discussions from there. So that was the point. So there was quite a bit of talking to facilitators and between facilitators in the week prior to the event, but the scope was given to them. Run it however you want to run it.
Amazing. And so the facilitators, did you identify them and requested them to do this role, or how did that process?
So from the time that the first invitations went out, it was put out there that we want this to be a community-driven event, and we're looking for participation from everyone. And a couple of the questions were, even in the registration form, were what would you like to gain, but also what can you share? So some people reached out even before registering saying, hey, we would like to do something on XYZ.
Amazing.
Will there be an opportunity to do that? Or some may have even said, can we give a talk on this? And then we said, no, we're not really doing talks. What about this instead? In other cases, it was based on what they had said, or in some cases we knew the people beforehand. It's like, why don't you run a session on this? We know you have a lot of experience and expertise here. So it's a combination of reaching out to people and also them reaching out to us.
Amazing. And so a follow-up question that comes to me now is, how much do you feel the space enabled the magic that happened that day?
Yeah, it's actually interesting. I mean, I would say the space was probably 8 out of 10 for the thing, but initially we had proposed 2 different rooms. We had proposed we would have 2 rooms to like have a breakout as such, and then somewhere a week beforehand, when we thought about the event and how it might be, because in the other scenario, the 2 rooms were not going to be next to each other. They would be on a different floor in the hotel. It wasn't. So then we thought, no, if we can get a larger room, which came available, we're like, okay, can we somehow squeeze the round tables and the demo booths at the back all in one room and still have space for 100 people to walk around and all, and that way I think it actually worked really well, that everything was
Nice.
together. It also was slightly cramped without being too cramped, but I think that was positive because it gave a feel of people being connected. I think if it was very, very open, it would have been harder for people to connect, or there's more tendency for people to
Yes.
discuss.
Yeah, I love that. The right kind of cramped. Just close enough.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's like, you go to this party, and there are these cocktail tables, and unless you feel you're,
yeah,
rubbing against someone, you don't get that feel of being
yeah.
in a cool party.
Now,
Uh,
having said that, the room was was fairly narrow and long.
okay.
So it did mean that during the one or two short talks that we had, it was a bit hard for the people
Ah,
to
okay.
grade and so
Right.
on.
Right.
Um, but given that that was a very small part of the agenda on the whole, I think it was okay.
And how did you meet this challenge of time? Because before this call, you were telling me that you manage time, and whenever you have people doing talks, that's one difficult thing to manage, right? In terms of managing time. So how did that work?
Allocate a
Okay.
lot of a reasonable amount of buffer to help someone 10 minutes, but then allocate 15 minutes. On the facilitated sessions, the roundtables with the 40 minutes, it was okay, a warning, a sort of a time check at 20 minutes, 10 minutes, 5 minutes, and then move people on. So buffer plus not
Right.
having too many sessions, and then not letting things run over, even if it looks something interesting is happening. I also think that knowing that there was a lot of open time, say post the roundtables for lunch and then the gallery walk afterwards, made us more confident that okay, no, let's stop now, but you can of course continue this conversation over lunch or in the afternoon or at the end of the day, which I think made also participants more willing to just stop on time and do the next thing.
Nice. And tell us a bit more about the gallery walk. Uh,
The gallery book, there were 12 organizations plus Tech4Dev who set up tables, fairly unsophisticated to be completely honest, partly by design, partly by constraint. It was people were given a 6 foot by 2 foot table. They were arranged around the back of the room. And typically they brought some printed material, some had posters, some had things, and then man, those booths, people came up and talked and asked. The feedback so far from all of the booth participants we've talked to is that they got good engagement, some leads even in certain cases, and it did seem like there was a lot of activity around those booths. And that continued even post-event for 45 to 60 minutes after the event finished.
Amazing. Uh, so, what was happening with Ashwin, the facilitator? Because you had the hard job of being, an insider who had to facilitate this meeting. Of course, there is attachment to outcome. There is a certain way you want to see this happen. So, it was a difficult role to take on. And so, I'd love to know
Sure,
what was going on in your mind and heart as the day began, as it progressed. I don't know.
sure. So initially, I mean, before the day began, the concerns were around things like the sound and those sort of things. Very thankfully, um, we were able to enlist someone from a partner organization called Bhumika, who very very energetic and good at holding a crowd. And Bhumika and I planned what the intro session, the closeout session might look like. Beforehand, she came up with some very good ideas, and we instituted those. And the speed networking session was very interesting. It had people moving around. It started with general just fun questions like do you like pets or not, etc., to then getting into more specifics on do you think the social sector uses technology effectively, and then
Lovely.
etc. She did that really well, and so it was definitely reassuring for me that I didn't need to carry the event start to finish. I think with that start was very powerful. Then after that, uh, it was just largely about keeping time and a smooth, just like the gentle, smooth flow between sessions and connecting, one question with another and so on. It's almost like trying to be the unnoticed but seamless glue between people. That was really what I was trying to do. If the speaker said something or in response to a question where I felt like, okay, it didn't quite answer what the audience was saying, or they might have this follow-up question, and inserting that myself, that was probably the main value I added, and then keeping time. And again, the panel session was moderated by someone else, Archana from Asra, which helped because at the start of the day, once the panelists came in, she could go away and focus on that completely. I didn't have to be directly involved. And again, I think I helped with the closeout session. So some delegation definitely helped. And I could concentrate a lot on just generally the mood and the pulse and try and fill that in where necessary.
Yeah, and tell us about the closing. What happened?
So the closing, I think this was something that, like I said, we could have done better. Not necessarily the closing itself wasn't designed correctly, but more what came before it and the energy. But the thought was reflect on the day. We had some basic Mentimeter ones. They went nicely. Like I liked, I wished, etc. They went nicely. Then there was a session. There was just a specific question put on. How would you like to continue this forward?
Nice.
And it's like maybe, and none is an option, but on WhatsApp or more face-to-face meetings or some community. And we explicitly kept saying everyone answers from our experience, everyone will answer something here, but these things typically don't carry forward. What do you think? And then saw some questions from some specific inputs from people. And then one person actually put their hand up and said, look, I think we should look at LinkedIn communities. I will set it up and go with that. And we think we need to have some more face-to-face meetings. And a few hands went up like, we're happy to run this, we're happy to run that. So that's what the follow-up is going to happen this week, to see how much of that comes to fruition. So that was good. Then we went into just reflect on the day, something insightful, something that you're ready to take forward, and something that you think you might be able to share back with the community, discuss with the person next to you. And initially we were going to do like a bit of a table shift and all of that type of thing, like, okay, do this, I'll go and shift to another table, and go and shift to another table and find it was almost like an I to we rule of three type of thing. So I'm inspired to do this, now find two other people in the room who are inspired on something similar, and then draw that. But somehow we just, like, that energy in the room was not there, so it just stopped at conversations at one table, and then a few people who were inspired reporting that back to their room and closed out like that. So that didn't quite go exactly. It wasn't bad, but it didn't quite go exactly with the level of convergence we were looking for. But the feedback we were getting as we were going through this was, look, if you try and force that, that will just be a bit too much.
Yes, and people are also processing the whole experience and what has happened. So, yeah, I think that's why I love the whole thing about, you said people reflecting on it, just discussing it with the partner. So it's just inspiring those thoughts to happen. And yeah, I think it's amazing that you also kept enough time for it, because people usually rush the closings and don't close well. And that's such a critical bridge, right, into normal life.
So we actually closed 15, 20 minutes early just because we felt, okay, that's enough. Let people talk more afterwards.
Yeah. No, I think that's great, right? How you were also sensing the energy in the room and shifting and
Mm,
adapting as needed. And as
mm.
you said, the spontaneous order emerged because you planned it so well. Uh, yeah, what helped you keep presence that day?
And, I think definitely having a lot of um, um, specific responsibilities taken care of. As I said, the Bhumika facilitation, Archana, um, with the panel discussion, the facilitators largely holding
Yes,
fort on the roundtables. Then from Tech4Dev, there was a note taker assigned to each of the
lovely.
tables as well. So with all of that, there was always time to, okay, think about, okay, how has it gone so far? What next do we need to change? Something there was someone outside specifically allocated to take interviews of people during the day, and
Amazing.
that was just the day before we decided we'll bring someone explicitly to do that rather than it being another thing I managed. And there was one person who took care of all of the facilities, meals, all of that type of stuff. So I think one, having responsibilities clearly demarcated helped. Second thing is just that pause, reflect, cycle, thinking about what are we really, keep continually going back to what are we trying to achieve from this event. And then on that basis, observing people, having maybe some short chats with people here and there. How is it going so far? What have you liked, etc. And then using that as a pulse check. And then, of course, as checking in with other organizers, what have you observed? How was the discussion on your table? Anything we need to change? All of that type of thing. So taking time to just keep getting feedback in little ways from people, having the delegating so that there is time to actually just observe the room.
Yes.
Um, and yeah, they would be the two things, and then reflecting, connecting it back to what we were trying to achieve.
Lovely. So my last question, Ashwin, today is: what, according to you, brings magic in gatherings?
Uh, Obviously, the right set of participants is which you may not always know in advance exactly who they are, but there should be, in this case, there were some people we said no to. We were not super strict, but we were slightly strict in the sense that even if someone was enthusiastic and they're not from a tech background at all, we felt that it would not be the best experience for them or for the other participants. There was still a spectrum though. There were obviously some very technical people and some people associated with tech, but slightly less so. We didn't have too many. This was specifically targeted at tech leaders, so we didn't have too many junior people. There were a couple that came here and there, but so I think having a purpose to the event and then identifying your participants does go a way towards that. But beyond that, I would say that with Magic, some level of scarcity. If you have too many events, then it becomes routine. I think some level of scarcity is definitely powerful. Some level of energy and alignment infused at the beginning of the event is also very important, where we get people energized to be active rather than passive and broadly aligned, and beforehand setting very clear expectations of that. And then that what we sort of talked about in our very first question, uh, being able to let go enough to allow things to emerge organically. However much you plan something in a person's head, you can get into this delusion that you can think out the thoughts of everyone in the room. It's stepping back from that and going, no, you know what, set some broad direction, but then let all of these, wonderful, intelligent human beings take it forward from there.
Yeah, yeah. No, thank you. This has been so wonderful, and especially because we had those conversations in the
Hmm,
beginning. So when it was still forming in
hmm.
your mind, and to actually see it
Yeah,
come together like this so amazingly,
yeah,
and with the clarity of purpose that you brought it
yeah.
together. Yeah.
Actually, I forgot to mention at the beginning, um, but you are a very big inspiration for me. I know we've only met a few times and so on, but every event I've seen you conduct and the team at Bullseye as a whole has been extraordinary. The level of preparation, but just then the way things flow so naturally, organically. It's like when I was born to do this, and it's I would answer in certain cases. I've attended a few events, and it's like, oh, what brought magic to this? I would just say, Mana brought magic to this. And even before the event, you did very generously offer a lot of inputs that we incorporated. So thank you very much.
Great. So what's the next event on your agenda to make magic in?
Regarding for Tech4Impact, we have to see there'll be probably some online events, and then based on the momentum we get from those, we will see. We have to think what's next in terms of regular events. Tech4Dev does run quarterly sprints. That's been a much longer running
Yes. Yeah.
thing, which is uh, uh, typically a few days, part dedicated to internal, a part of it dedicated to NGOs. And that's everyone from NGOs rather than just technical folk. And so those sprints will obviously continue. And but this Tech4Impact specifically focus on the technology leaders. We have to see what's next.
Sure.
There
Sure.
will be some online sessions, like I said, but then
Yes.
beyond that, we have to see
Yeah, I loved what
what.
you said. The element of scarcity is
Mm,
important to keep the magic. So that's a lovely takeaway for me.
yeah.
Also, thank you so much for your time. It was wonderful to have this reflective conversation. And just to end with that, those who will listen to this lovely conversation, if you have stories of your magical gatherings, please reach out to me. It could be in personal spaces, community spaces, or at work. And I'd love to capture those stories. So
So
thank you
thank
so
you very much
much.
for the opportunity.
Thank
Thank you.
you.